Hello and happy Wednesday. Thanks to everyone who is joining us this afternoon. It's 1 o'clock Eastern Time in Atlanta. And if you have registered and you're listening to this recording, thank you so much. We are glad to be able to offer this to folks all over the country, we hope, who can take part in our career coaching and professional development programs with the Emory Alumni Association. My name is Lane Conville-Canny. I'm the Senior Associate Director for our Alumni Learning Programs. I am based here in Atlanta at the Miller Ward House on a very sunny, beautiful fall Wednesday. But again, thank you so much for joining us. Just to let you know, this is being recorded to all who are attending live, and we invite you to submit your questions in the question box of GoToWebinar. We'll get to those at the end. Anything that comes up as Hallie is giving her presentation, we do want to hear from you. Let us know any questions or confusion, and we'll be sure to answer those at the end. Without further ado, I'm excited to have Hallie Crawford with us today. She has been a certified career coach and national career expert for over 19 years. Her company, HallieCrawford.com, and team of coaches have helped thousands of people worldwide identify and transition into their dream career, effectively navigate their job search, and enhance their performance at work. She's regularly featured as a career expert in the media, including U.S. News, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, CNN, and Fox Business News. Please do check out her website. It's HallieCrawford.com for more information about her offerings and her team and the great variety of products and services that she can offer you. As the year is winding down, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about things that have happened in the year and where you're going in 2020. So this is a great topic. 5 ways to fix your resume for the new year. So all those who are thinking, I might think about a change next year, I'm glad you joined us. This is a great topic. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Hallie and just remind everybody to submit your questions throughout the presentation. Thanks, Hallie.
Thank you. Thanks, Lane, for that introduction. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here today. Lane and I were discussing before we hopped on that, as we know, it is the week after Thanksgiving, and that because the holidays seem like they're coming up a lot faster this year due to scheduling, we really appreciate your time because we know it's a busy time of year. And one of the things that I wanted to say as we dive in here to talk about how to fix up your resume and update it for the new year is, a lot of our clients will tell us, I should, or I could slow down in my job search because nobody's going to be around, people aren't hiring, et cetera, et cetera. And we actually don't recommend that our clients do that. Yes, some people might be a little bit harder to get a hold of, or it might take a little bit longer to set up that informational interview. But we have had clients get hired on Christmas Day, for example. So you just never know who's going to be in the office. Some of those people like to go in when it's quiet. And in some cases, because people are less busy, they will have more time for networking with you. So fixing up your resume, this is a great time to do that so that you're ready for the new year, new budgets, et cetera, when people are hiring. So why are we talking about how to fix up your resume? Obvious reason, like we said, is because this is a great time to do so, especially for the new year if you're considering making a career change or just a job change. And the reason why we're going to talk about this today, though, too, is because we understand, and I completely understand this, which is why I'm kind of chuckling, that every time our clients start to talk about or start thinking about updating their resume, they're like, it's not their favorite thing to do. And we totally get that. It can be very difficult and overwhelming for people, and it's not always the most enjoyable thing. It can be overwhelming because, as you see on this slide here, you may not know where to start, and you just don't even want to get started because it seems like a mountain to climb. A lot of people get confused about what formatting they should use, and they're not sure how their resume should look these days. By the way, resumes look a lot prettier than they used to. They're not sure what to include versus, what to put on there versus what to leave off. And finally, a lot of people will tell us too, I don't feel like I'm a good writer. Or some people will even say, I spoke with someone yesterday who said, I am a great writer actually, but not about myself. So that's why we're here to talk about how to fix it and give you some specific tangible steps that we actually use with our clients all the time in order to fix up and update their resume, okay? And I understand too, by the way, that this is not the most fun thing because when I had to start updating my resume in order to become a career coach and, apply for jobs and all of that before I started my business, I totally got that it was a pain. So the steps that we're going to give you today are steps that we leverage and use with our clients and have done so for the past 19 years. So we've been in business and coaching for 19 years. I know some of you are probably thinking, she sounds like she's 12. How is that possible? I'm actually 46. So here's why, if you take a look on this next slide here, why a solid, clearly written, effective resume is so important. And there's two statistics on the slide here that employers and headhunters or recruiters, everybody, they spend a max of 10 to 15 seconds scanning a resume before they decide to read further or read in further depth, before they decide to keep that, candidate and consider them or toss the resume in the trash. And an average corporate job opening attracts around 250 resumes. Obviously, this is an average, and it depends on the position, et cetera, but that's a lot of resumes, okay? And by the way, here, as we're thinking about and, talking about the statistics, some of our clients have started to ask us, gosh, like, do I even really need a resume? Like, what about LinkedIn? Isn't that taking the place of it? Just so you all know that, yes, LinkedIn is critically important, and that is something that you want to consider after you update your resume, but you do still need traditional, so to speak, if you will, the typical resume. LinkedIn has not taken the place of resumes. Eventually, maybe that will be the case, but not yet. So just keep that in mind too. So here are like 3 criteria that I wanted to share with you first, and then we'll get into our agenda and I'll let you know what we're going to be covering today. But you need to make sure that your resume really represents you in these 3 ways. If you take a look at the bottom of this slide, it needs to sell you and market you, obviously. But the other thing that sometimes people tend to kind of neglect or forget or not do as well with their resume is it needs to brand you as well and sell you as a specific type of professional. And we'll talk about what we mean by branding as we go today, okay? And the third thing that your resume needs to do for you, and you should feel this way as a result of updating and working on it, is that it should help you feel more confident. So it represents you accurately, but helps you really shine. The ideal is after one of our clients, works with one of our resume writers on our team, they'll come back to us and say, gosh, like I feel so much better and cooler, than I did before I got this done. Because of the way things are written, that it really shines a light on what your skills and your strengths are. So we actually want to dive into our first poll here, Lane. If you can pull that up, that would be great. And ask, based on these 3 criteria, if you all feel like your resume sells you, okay, check that box, but also does it really brand you and help you stand out from the crowd? And does it help you, or do you feel confident about your existing resume? And by the way, it's okay if the answer is no, and that's why we're here today, no problem. And Lane, if you would do me a favor and just read out the results, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, we've got a couple more people submitting.
Yeah, take your time.
Looks like we're pretty close. Oh,
okay,
it's
good.
tied. If anybody else hasn't submitted, you can be the tiebreaker.
I love it. I don't think I've had a tie before. That's great.
Yeah, this is spot on, 50-50.
Okay, good. So the good news is that half of you feel like it has these, 3 components or elements to it. So that's fantastic. So as you go, for those of you specifically, as we go through the process here today, pick up any additional nuggets that you have not implemented yet. And for those of you who don't feel this way, you're in the right place. So it's perfect timing. So let's talk about our agenda here. And just as a quick reminder, as we talk about this, we are recording this, so you will get a recording of our presentation today. And then on the next slide, if any of you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, I'll give you my email address and you can just ask us for that. We'd be happy to share it with you. So we're thinking about 5 ways to fix your resume, but specifically we're going to talk about for the new year as well as we go. And these are the 5 things that we're going to discuss today: formatting and how to get your resume into a more up-to-date format. we still have a lot of people that will send us their existing resume and it looks old. It looks like out of date. So the formatting is actually really important. Branding and how to really brand yourself in this document on your resume, your profile summary, what should be included and how to update it for this next year, relevancy and making sure that it's relevant for the direction that you're headed, and also how to handle best your employment history. Just as I said before, if any of you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, I would actually highly recommend this because I've got some samples in here that it would be good for you to have. So sample headers for resumes, et cetera, et cetera. So just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com and we'll get that over to you right away. Alrighty, so let's talk about formatting first. Some of you may have seen this kind of fancier formatting, if you will, some not. But here's the deal with formatting. Some people may think that this is kind of the fluffy, less important part of a resume, but it actually isn't. Formatting gives you an eye-catching presentation that really can make a huge impression versus one that looks and blends in with everybody else's, okay? Or one that's riddled with like formatting inconsistencies. If your resume looks like everybody else's, it may be hard to not just distinguish it from the rest, but it won't stand out from the pile on the person's desk or their desktop, so to speak, as much. We see resumes with lots of different formats these days, and we've seen, more and more creative ideas as people get more creative with their resumes. You want to be reasonable with it. There's no kitty cats or funny pictures on it, okay, of course. But you want to ensure that your resume is more eye-catching than you may have thought about in the past before. You also want to make sure, just by the way, that yours fits with your industry. So for example, if you work in a more creative industry, you can get more creative with your resume, like marketing or graphic design. You can go for it a little bit more. But if it's a more traditional industry like banking, law firm, et cetera, you can stick with a more traditional format. So we actually have different kind of format samples that we provide to our clients in order for them to kind of choose not just what fits their industry, because that's part of obviously what we guide them towards too, what's going to be best. But it also, it needs to kind of fit your personality type as well. So if you take a look at this next slide here, this is one example of a more creative, if you will, kind of format. And by the way, we have seen even more creative than this. This is kind of a little bit of the middle of the road, if you will, but more creative than some for sure. So you'll see here that text boxes and shading is very common these days, and we recommend it. We do recommend using some sort of color on your resume, whether it's red or blue. Those are the most common ones that we see. And you'll notice here too, this just makes this person's resume much more easy to scan and understand what is what the different sections are, et cetera. And then this is just this person's her first and last initials, obviously, too. So this is just one example, as I said, of many that how resumes look a little bit prettier, okay? You'll notice, too, that you want to have your LinkedIn profile at the top. A lot of people will now have that instead of their mailing address. They'll just have their cell phone, their email, and their LinkedIn profile. You do want to make sure that's there. And then if you take a look here, and I know this is kind of small, which is why I recommended getting the presentation if you're interested. But areas of expertise is one section. Career overview is another one. She also has account executive, her profile. This helps brand her at the top as well. You do not have to have these exact sections, everyone, but these are the types of sections that we would recommend. We may change the names of the sections for different clients, again, depending on what their goal is and what their industry calls for, but this gives you kind of a basic gist here. So here's the deal overall with formatting, just to piggyback on that, is in addition to the things we said already, you want to make sure with formatting that you avoid having too many font styles. Some people will not review their resume enough, and they may have, too many different styles or too many different sizes of font. You want it to be clean, easy to read, and everything's consistent. You want to have the layout be consistent. So you want to have and the same amount of white space everywhere else, and you want the text boxes to be relatively consistent as well, again, so that it looks good and easy to read. A lot of people will have margins that are too small, and we want you to have a minimum of 0.6 inches at least. And you need to have enough white space on your resume as well. A lot of people think that, oh, I want to put everything on there because it's going to make me look really good and like I have a lot of qualifications. Your resume, everyone, is not everything but the kitchen sink. It is supposed to be tailored to each position and also to each industry or the industry that you're targeting, okay? So you want to make sure that you only have things that are relevant to that job that you're applying for. That's a critical piece of it, because if you put things on your resume that are irrelevant, they're going to start thinking of you as that type of person versus the brand that you want to promote, okay? And then finally, you want to avoid underlining. By the way, bolding is okay, but underlining tends to mess up the ATS scanning software systems. So we do not recommend underlining. It's okay to have lines and lines around your text boxes like we showed you before, but you want to be careful about and just avoid underlining, okay? So that's the basic gist of formatting. And just by the way, there are a ton of different formats that you could even Google and look up online to get an idea of what some possible options are for you. But we gave you some of the ideas before about text boxes and shading and using colors on there as well. Let's talk about number 2, and that's the branding piece of it, which is really, really important. So we can't just say, I'm good at stuff, like it says on this slide here, obviously. So branding yourself using your resume is critical as well. You need to show them, obviously, who you are, what you bring to the table, but how you stand out from your competition and your peers. You need to paint the picture, ideally, and think about it this way, everybody. You need to paint the picture of what it would be like almost if they hired you, as much as you possibly can as you're writing your resume, okay? So here's the deal with the branding piece. Your resume is basically, bottom line, your personal marketing document, okay? And one of the ways that you can brand yourself is think about your name as your brand, okay? So if you take a look at this slide here and how this person started to brand herself a little bit more, you'll see here that there's a little bit of formatting, but there's also text as well, okay? So she's got, this graphic design behind here and then her information, all of that. By the way, she does not have her LinkedIn profile. That's something she needs to add to this section here. But if you notice here, there are bullet points below her name and also kind of a tagline. And we highly recommend that you come up with something that's like this, that explains to a prospective employer, again, who you are and what you bring to the table, what your brand is. And if we can go ahead and get this next poll lane pulled up, that would be great. We're curious how many currently have a header on their resume that brands them like this. And then I'll talk about this as you guys are answering that one as well for just a second here. Okay, so as you all are answering this, we want you to have, by the way, a header that either looks like this or similar to it. This is a little bit more creative, like we talked about before, so you may want to tone yours down a smidge, but you need to think about the key strengths that you bring to the table, okay? And who you are, not just in terms of your soft skills, but also your hard skills as well, and the results that you provide. So what you'll notice here, and then Lane, if you can read the results here for me in just a second, that would be great. But what you'll notice here, everyone, is this can be kind of the first sentence, if you will, of what could be your elevator speech. So just as a quick reminder, as we're talking about all of this, ideally, to make it a little bit easier on you all, you shouldn't be having to recreate the wheel with each kind of piece of material or element of your job search. You can use the content from your elevator speech in different places and vice versa. Okay, Lane, if you can let me know the results, that would be great.
Yeah, it looks like all the right people are on the call. 75% of people do not have a header.
Okay, all right, good. So good that you're here, not good that you don't have one, but good that you're here. So know that you're not alone. Now, here's the deal with this. The other thing that I wanted to mention too is you want to have your resume, everyone, you want the header to match the cover letter header too. So she would, for example, she would have the same header on her cover letter as well, okay? It's not redundant. It makes them kind of matchy-matchy, if you will, okay? So let's take a look at step number 3 here, and this is your profile summary, okay? So your profile summary is the summary at the top of the page on your resume that goes underneath your header, and it lets potential employers know right away who you are and what your expertise is, but in a longer statement, okay? So your professional profile or summary, if you will, this should be around 3 or 4 sentences. The sentences can be a little bit run on. They don't have to be exactly perfect or grammatically correct, okay? Don't make it sound hokey, but you get what I'm saying. They don't have to be, it's a marketing document, so it doesn't have to be as grammatically correct. And what you want to do, let me just take a move to the next slide here. The professional profile or summary is a statement at the top that outlines who you are and what you bring to the table. It is part of the branding piece and an additional piece of that in addition to your header there. So if you take a look at Joe Smith here, obviously that's a generic name. And this is a more, by the way, formatting wise, is a more typical kind of traditional formatting. What I would do with this one is I would add a little bit of color, but as you can see here, he's got the shading, he's got, different bullet points, which we do recommend within reason. Don't go too crazy with the different bullet points, but it kind of outlines how these two sections are different, the top two. So what we're talking about here with the profile summary is this beginning section that's underneath his header. So these 4 check-marked bullet points, okay? And the way this person did it was in bullet point format. You can also have it be like a short paragraph, and that's okay too. He also used bolding here at the beginning with the specific things that he wants them to understand or get, from the get-go, okay? So this is an example that you can kind of use to get some ideas from, okay? It should outline who you are, like we said, and be results-based as well. And I don't mean results-based that you raised, $5 million for, community campaign or whatever it was. Those results can go further down under each job, but you want to talk in results-based kind of language, if you will, in your summary as well, okay? The bulleted list below, just so you all know, should support what you've said up above, but this is more specifically, okay, these are the skills and strengths that I have that you haven't referenced as much above in your profile summary. So these are 2 different sections, but they should support each other effectively, okay? So if for any reason any of you do not have a profile summary at the top, this is something that is a make or break. You absolutely have to have this. And just by the way, we recommend that you have this at the top, and that typically if you have had several years of work experience, more than 2 or 3 years of work experience, this is what goes at the top, and then your education goes at the bottom, okay? So just so you know too, before we move to step number 3 here for updating your resume, if any of you would like some of these cover letter examples or resume examples, the ones that we're talking about today, but additional ones as well, we'd be happy to share those with you. Please feel free to email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. Happy to share that with you as well as the presentation. All right, so let's take a look at step number 3. And this is as part of your profile summary, you want to make sure that you are answering these questions. So when you're starting to write this out and thinking about, what kind of content you need to be including, you want to make sure, by the way, that your profile summary answers these questions that are on this slide. Why should the employer read this? Why should they even consider reading further or considering bringing you in for a resume? What skills and strengths do you bring to the table? And like we said just a moment ago, what value do you have that I can use as a prospective employer? So this is where we start to talk about the value you provide and the results that you can provide to the prospective employer too, okay? And by the way, as part of this for the new year, one of the first things that you want to do, everyone, before you start working on your resume is to inventory your skills and achievements. What has happened in this past year? And this is obviously the perfect time to do this. You want to think about this checklist. Have you achieved or garnered any awards? What accomplishments have you achieved this year as well? Tangible ones, but also intangible. And what I mean by that is, was there a specific project that was a really big deal that you completed, a new process that you implemented, or an accomplishment in terms of your soft skills? For example, did you develop your leadership skills more? Or did you gain a certification or take any additional classes that you should add to your resume? And by the way, too, the last piece here is really, really important on the slide. You want to adjust any keywords that you may have put on your resume when you first wrote it, years ago, or adjusted it whenever that was. And you want to just make sure that there's new terminology specific to your industry or the new organization that you're applying to a job for. You want to make sure that the new terminology is on there, and so that it's current, up to date, fresh. So those are the things that you want to have as your checklist as a review for this past year. Let's talk about step number 4, and this is relevance, and making sure that your resume is extremely and specifically relevant to the jobs that you are looking at. So here's the deal with this one in terms of relevance, is your resume is not one size fits all. We actually still do have some clients say, do I have to tailor my resume to each job? Yes, absolutely you do. Now here's the deal though, everyone, is ideally you have your resume so well laid out and written that each time you have to make those adjustments for a specific job that you're applying for, it only takes a few minutes to do so, okay? Give you a quick example because I think this will help highlight what we're talking about. We had a client who worked in corporate fraud and investigation here in Atlanta at Coca-Cola. She was applying for 2 different jobs. It was actually, she was looking in Texas. And those 2 different jobs, one was corporate fraud and investigation and going out there and finding it, and also handling that process and what to do about it. But the second job was more of managing the whistleblowing program for, it was actually Volvo. It's pretty funny. It's good, great company. And so the 2 different jobs she was looking at and applying for, they required, for the most part, the same expertise, experience, and skill set. But one was more, the whistleblowing program and managing that was more of a project or program management position. She wasn't going out there and having to investigate the fraud. She would just have to manage it when someone else reported it. So we went through her resume, and every time she had talked about investigation, that's where she took that out and instead said program and project management, which is something that was honest that she had done before, so she wasn't making things up, but it made that resume obviously more tailored to that position, okay? So actually, let's go ahead and do our third poll here. Lane, if you can open that up, I'll explain what I mean by the master copy of your resume, and then we'll talk about this last piece on the slide here. So one of the things, as we just talked about, is you want to ideally have a master copy of your resume, everyone, to make your job search and resume writing easier. You want to have one master copy that has everything on it, everything that you'd want to say, all of your past work experience, etc. And every time you need to create a resume, a new one for a specific job opening, you take that master resume, create a new one, and edit it and adjust it for that specific position. So that master copy is something basically that you don't touch. You create every resume from that, and it makes it that much easier for you, more effective, and then you're not hunting and pecking and saying, okay, this job is the most like this other one that I applied for a couple months ago, but oh, I can't remember which one it was. Makes things less confusing. So Lane, as we get those come in, if you could go ahead and read out the results to me, that would be great. The question is, does anyone on the call today have a master copy of their resume and use kind of the process that we just talked about?
Yeah, so it looks like everyone on the call does have a master.
Yes. Okay, good. So that means our message is getting across. That's awesome. So keep in mind the story that we just talked about in order to make those kind of tiny tweaks and changes from your master resume. That's the best way to do it. So you guys are in a good spot. So obviously, just the last piece on this slide here, and then we'll get to step number 5, is yes, you do want to tailor your resume to each position you apply for. Like we said, highlight those relevant skills and experience. Keep in mind that you may want to use industry-specific terminology and lingo, and maybe even specific terminology that they have used in their job description as well for that company. And make sure that you include any quantifiable results for all of your skills as well. And we're going to talk about this more in just a moment. But make sure as much as possible, everyone, you put quantifiable results in your bullet points under each of your jobs. I'm going to say one thing about that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it in step number 5 here in a second. But here's the deal that I want to illustrate with this quantifiable results. I realize that not everyone can say, oh, I raised this amount of money or whatever it is. Not everyone has a job that has quantifiable results like that as specifically as they might like. So in some cases, you can have that. And if that's the case for you, that would be great. But the way that you get as close as you possibly can to quantifiable results is, for example, if you've managed a certain number of people, put in there managed team of X people worldwide, including country, across different time zones, whatever would be relevant that for that specific job that you're applying for. So for each bullet point on your resume, you want to make sure that you're thinking about and answering the question basically like, so what? So why should the employer care that I managed this project or that I researched and tracked the data for, this particular client or whatever it was? You need to come up with, and I say make up, not in terms of lying about it, but in terms of kind of explain what the result may be. And in that example, it could be to enable the client to effectively evaluate their marketing strategies and, identify their target audience. So spit out basically, and this is literally what we will tell clients, spit out and tell them exactly what the results were of your work, even if it's not something that you can exactly quantify, or if your employer doesn't have those specific results. Tell them that story anyway, okay? Because that will help your your resume be that much more tailored to the position, but also paint the picture of what it would be like if they hired you, obviously, too, okay? So in terms of your employment history, let's talk about step number 5, and this is to update your employment history, and this is one of the most obvious ones, but there's a couple specific things we want to say about the new year, et cetera, et cetera. On this next slide here, at the top here, I apologize, it should be step number 5 and say employment history instead of relevance. So updates for the new year, you want to do 3 specific things, okay? Is remove any outdated information. And what we mean by this is important. So remember earlier we said if anything is not relevant to the job, it's going to diffuse the message. Think of as someone, as they're kind of reading through your resume, they're making assumptions about you and making a decision about who you are as a professional. So you want to make sure that you don't have any information on there that is either irrelevant, job-wise or information-wise, okay, or any information that's kind of outdated or no longer relevant, okay? And this goes especially for those people who are changing career paths. If that's the case for you, you really want to make sure this is the case, okay? So go through your resume with a fine-tooth comb just as a once-over, and think about, okay, is this job, for example, too old and I need to just, leave it off, especially because it's no longer relevant, okay? Now, when we talk about and think about employment history, if you take a look at the next slide here, remember that there are 3 different ways and kind of styles or formats of resumes, if you will, to highlight your job history. There's the straight chronological, which is the most common one, and this one highlights or is good for people, I should say too, that highlight steady growth and consistent advancements within either an existing organization or within your industry, okay? That's the easiest one. The functional resume is laid out so that it focuses on relevant skills and functions. So functional resumes are the ones where you see at the top where they will have like a bulleted list of here are my relevant skills and qualifications. And then underneath each of the job descriptions, closer to the bottom, is more the listing of the person's job, title, the company, and the date and the location. And they may have one sentence underneath, but beyond that, that's it. So the chronological could be at the bottom, and then the rest of it at the top is the functional, which is highlighting the relevant skills and qualifications, okay? And then there's also kind of a hybrid model, and we'll show you these examples in just a second here, which is a combination of the chronological and the functional, okay? If you're looking at just strictly chronological, like we said, if you're kind of sticking with where you are now and you've had that steady advancement, the tips for this type of resume are to summarize your position and include the scope of the position, what were the requirements of the job and what were the results as well. You want to make sure, and by the way, this goes for all of the different resumes, that you start your sentences with active verbs, nothing that's too passive. Some examples are on this slide here: managed, developed, created, etc. You want to make sure that your verbs are active and kind of engage the reader, okay? You want to select the top 5 to 7 accomplishments that best highlight the experience or success that you've had in the past year and even prior to that, that would be relevant to the position you're applying for. And as we said earlier, include measurable results wherever possible, including if it's, as we said, this is, I managed a team of X number of people and they were located within this region, and why that matters to the prospective employer. The next one is, if you're taking a look at or considering a functional resume, some of the basics you want to consider are that you can list your work history, and as we said before, you can just list your title, employer, and location. List the positions that are relevant together. Another way to do it is list the positions that are relevant together under a titled heading like relevant experience. I, by the way, like even better branding that section and say marketing experience, for example. Okay, so again, you're branding yourself. And then you can list the other experience in a separate section further down, listed as other professional experience. Okay, so that's how some of the basics for a functional resume. And the hybrid resume basics are, you can keep the sections of a chronological resume and use bullet points to highlight your skills, though, under each of those jobs. So for example, you could have bullet points like these examples on the slide here: adept multitasker, et cetera, versatile writing skills, all of that. So this is kind of a hybrid of the two. I like this option a lot for people who are changing career paths, because some employers and some recruiters feel that a truly, functional resume that is only functional, sometimes they feel like that's a red flag, like an employee is trying to hide something. So I highly recommend the hybrid resume if you are looking to change career paths. Okay, so those are some thoughts to help you adjust your resume to one of those formats if that makes sense for your situation. And just by the way here, really quickly before we keep moving with the hybrid resume for a moment, if any of you feel like, okay, my situation is really unique, Hallie, and I need to ask some more questions, or you need additional advice about your resume for your unique or specific situation, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'd be happy to schedule a complimentary strategy session to talk with you about this or any other career goals that you have. Just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. Happy to do that. All right, so we'll start to wrap up with the employment history, and this is our last step here for today, and then we'll get to Q&A in just a moment. So in terms of the hybrid resume, hybrid meaning hybrid of functional and chronological, in your experience section, one of the things you can do is you can lump your experience into skill sets and use cumulative dates as a different way to lay out your resume. So if you look at the slide here as an example, it could mean, okay, administrative assistant, et cetera, support, these are the dates, and then underneath, this person would put underneath kind of this header of these are the similar types of jobs, if you will. She would have the city, state, and the actual company or organization as well, and put the bullet points underneath each. Okay, so that's another way that you can lay out your hybrid resume. One of the things I did want to mention today, just as our gift to you, if anyone feels like, okay, this is overwhelming and I need help with it, we do have resume, LinkedIn, and cover letter writers on our staff. We'd be happy to allow you to use this coupon for $20 off any of those services. Just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com and just reference in the subject line Emory University webinar. Happy to give you that discount, okay? We showed you some of the sample resumes before, some of the beginning pages, but actually in the next couple of slides here, the rest of this person's specific resume and how it's laid out is listed on these next few slides. So again, if you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com so you can have a copy of that. And then finally, in terms of just some final extra tips, and please go ahead if you haven't already and start to enter in your questions in the chat box. We'd be happy to answer those. But obviously, you always need to proofread your resume and have someone else take a look at it for you. I can't tell you how many times a client will send us their resume and there's grammatical or spelling errors that are kind of obvious that, in hindsight, they're embarrassed. But it's hard when we're looking at one document for so long, it's hard to be objective with it. So you always proofread, obviously, but get other people to do it as well. We do recommend about a 12-point format. Times New Roman is fine. It's personally not my favorite. I like Arial or Garamond better. Printed, obviously, when you're bringing it to a meeting, printed on high quality paper. And just remember too, as we talked about, the cover letter should have the same formatting, header and otherwise. You want them to match and look similar so that people understand, okay, these go together. And if for some reason it kind of moves around on their desk, they realize that too. So as we start to get to Q&A, I want to remind you that even though I realize that this may seem like a lot of work and kind of a pain, we totally get it, that having a solid resume is absolutely worth it. It is such a critical piece to your search, just as LinkedIn is. More than half of candidates are eliminated from when they're searching online and the online job search process and applying online, I should say, they're eliminated by applicant tracking systems. And so having the right resume and the right formatting is so critical because you might not even get through the front door if you don't have that. Just by the way, kind of as a side note, and this goes along with social media, obviously, and your brand online too, in addition to your resume, is a ton of companies, 73%, have used social media to successfully recruit and hire candidates, okay? So social media, and when I say that, I mostly mean LinkedIn, but you can even upload your resume to LinkedIn as a downloadable link. We actually recommend that too. They use that to find people online. And so uploading your resume to some of the, job search sites like Glassdoor and Indeed, and obviously, having a solid LinkedIn profile, it's a really big deal because too many or so many employers are looking for applicants that way versus dealing with handling 250 applications and digging through it all. And then finally, as a reminder, only about 5 applicants actually earn an interview from all of those applications. So creating that solid resume and LinkedIn profile, by the way, is absolutely worth it and a critical piece to your search. All right, so let's go ahead and move to the Q&A. I feel like I spit out a lot of information here today, so I'm going to be quiet for a moment. And Lane, if you could start to read out to me some of the questions that have come through, that would be fantastic. By the way, everyone, if we do not get to your question today for any reason, or if you have any questions later on that you think of that you want to ask, don't hesitate to email me at admin@halliecrawford.com. I'll just pull up this next slide here so that you have our contact information. I'd be happy to answer.
Great, thanks, Hallie. We've got a lot of good questions that have come in. Our first one is, if you have quite a number of years of experience, is it to your advantage to mention it? For example, 18 plus years of experience, or is that a turnoff to recruiters, or should you use words like accomplished, seasoned, etc.?
That's a great question because some people understandably worry about ageism. What I tell people is it depends a little bit on the company that you're applying to. Like, for example, if it's a younger company and more of a startup, and based on the job description, you think they'd be looking for someone who's not quite as seasoned, you may want to tone it down a little bit. In general, though, what I tell people who are closer to, my age, because I could say that too at 46, is I say tout your experience and own it and sell it as a selling point because it definitely is. There are a lot of benefits to it. So again, it depends a little bit on the position that you're applying for and the industry that you're in. But my kind of rule of thumb is I'd rather people say it and own it than feel like they have to hide it.
That's great. Our next question is, if making a career change or re-entering at lower level after a long gap, does the branding tagline need to focus more on what someone is seeking rather than what they've done in the past?
Yeah, you want it to be more what they're seeking, absolutely. But you can't, obviously, you're not going to make something up and lie about it. So it's going to be, or ideally should be, grounded in what you've done in the past, but it should be what you're going for because you don't want to sell yourself for something that you're not interested in any longer.
Great. The next one is, I'm building my resume for interior design. My goal is to design hospitality spaces such as retail stores and hotels. After my project for Hyatt, I realized I wanted to be at a place where I could also integrate my previous study in brain science. How should I go about doing that?
I would first consider and make sure that it would be relevant to the direction that you want to go in, because wanting to incorporate it in some way, shape, or form is different from it being relevant. So be really clear about if it would be. And if it would be, I would integrate that within, like, closer to the end of your professional profile and mention coursework or, whatever that was. And then if it's relevant enough or highly relevant, then you could actually have it mentioned as a separate kind of section, like almost as a job that you had, but obviously you would explain it a little bit further and then list underneath what the relevant coursework would be. Without seeing it and talking with you a little bit further, that would be kind of my big picture advice.
Yeah, that's great. Our last question, I was at a company for 3 months but left due to cultural differences. I had every reason to believe we ended our work engagement on good terms, but have since learned that they're providing a false information to reference checkers. How should I handle this?
Okay, so say they're providing false information to reference checkers?
Yes.
Say it again for me, Lane, just so I digest it because I want to make sure I get it right.
This person was at a company for 3 months but left due to cultural differences. They had every reason to believe they ended on good terms, but have since learned that they are providing a false information to reference checkers for current jobs.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so unfortunately, this isn't the kind of situation where I think it would be comfortable or appropriate to contact your former employer. If for some reason you had a good relationship with any of these people who are providing the references and you would feel comfortable chatting with them about what's going on, okay, that's one option. But what I would do is I would have different references to use and put on your reference sheet instead that are going to give you positive references. So there's kind of 2 action steps that you can take, but for sure I would change to have different references instead since that's happening. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's rough. I think that's it for right now. Thank you so much. That was a great, really informative webinar.
You're welcome. Good. I feel like I said a lot, and hopefully you all could hear me okay too. I know my dog, I brought him to work today, and he was barking a little bit in the background, which I can't stand, but you know how that goes.
That's a good life hack.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you all for being here today. We greatly appreciate it. And hopefully, too, this, made you feel like there's some manageable steps. I know that there's a lot, so don't expect to update your whole resume and do everything in a weekend. Give yourself some time to work through it, which, again, is, like we said, it's a good time to start now so that you've got time for the new year.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us. And please do check back on our website, engage.emory.edu, and go to the calendar. We've got several great webinars between now and the end of the year. If you guys are looking for tips on job changing or are thinking about just greater happiness in your life, please do check those out. Thank you again to Hallie Crawford for giving us another great webinar. And check her website out, halliecrawford.com. I'll be sending some more follow-up information with our recording. Thanks again. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.